Hello, welcome to Creatacast with your host, David Welch. Today's show, we're going to go over submissions again. I am taking submissions. I'm pretty sure there are a ton of people who would love to submit their work, but we just haven't gotten to that stage just yet. So for those who are out there in the Twitterverse, for those who are out there on YouTube, let's get this going. I want to make this Creatacast get bigger. I want the show to expand, and I want those whose lives have been affected by literature, poetry, nonfiction, and just storytelling and craft to get their work out and publish and go everywhere. Excuse me. Sneezed on air, but it happens. Moving forward. All right. So, today's show, like I said, we're going to go over submissions. I know we don't have a lot of submissions. I've gone over my emails, and I don't have submissions yet. I could be missing some, though. So I'm checking my spam, making sure I don't have any lingering in there. And it's not looking like I do. However, we can improve upon this. We can go forward and have an official submissions page, which will be huge. So we're working on that. So we're going to focus again on. There's some books that I want to get out there that have really helped me as a writer, and have helped me improve upon mechanics. And I want to talk about the importance of constructive feedback and constructive criticism. Okay? For those out there who are in your MFA programs, or if you're in your undergraduate creative writing program, or even if you're in high school, or even if you meet regularly with a creative writing group, it's important to acknowledge and understand the power of feedback. We definitely want to ensure that when we do give feedback to our fellow writers, our fellow authors and creatives, that it's constructive in its nature, right? Now, for poetry, it's real easy to give positive feedback. But just simply saying that you enjoyed the poem doesn't help the writer. Okay? Get into the nitty gritty. Ask about line breaks. Ask about, what made you choose this word over another word that may have been more impactful, or that could have, done X, Y, and Z in the poem. So to give positive feedback is great, but you want to give constructive feedback, which I believe is more important. Okay, we definitely want to not just go after their mechanical problems as far as their grammar and such. What we do want to do, especially in poetry, if there is no grammar at all, we may want to identify areas where grammar would help the poem move along smoothly, be better read, however we go with that. Okay. So that's the goal. Just make sure, if you're in your creative writing programs and you're doing your undergraduate work or your MFA program, responding to and reading the entire story is definitely going to help you. There are some times where, I've admittedly in my MFA program skimmed over some of the ending details. I thought I had enough of the story to really offer constructive feedback, and then the end of the story does a switcheroo that I didn't catch, and that's on me. That's unfortunately how I've shown up when it comes to giving that constructive feedback in the past. Not anymore. So get into the nitty gritty. Make sure you read every detail of somebody's story. And if you're an editor out there, I know it sounds rote at this point, but in the margins, if it's your copy to work with, offer suggestions, remind, especially us writers out there, especially as fiction guys, about continuity. And I see this all the time with characters where a character will have a scar or a limp or something that's never mentioned again. So continuity is going to be huge when composing your next work. Whether it's a work of flash fiction, a little bit longer fiction, or you're penning your first novel, right? So, going back to that constructive criticism, we want to improve upon our writer's story, and we want to acknowledge their, effort to get even that far into their creative capacity. Because a lot of people give a stab at writing and they feel they're no good if everyone just tells them, hey, you're good, and then they get a rejection letter in the mail from a major publisher, or if they get a rejection letter from a magazine that they're trying to submit to, so are they really getting positive feedback at that point? We want to be sure that we do that, okay? Now, you don't have to be brutal. You don't have to be the harsh critic. We definitely, there's always one in a group. There's always going to be one that's super harsh and super, blunt about how they feel about the work. But you don't necessarily need to be egregious to offer help with the work. So, one of the better things we can do as a constructive criticizer or somebody who gives feedback quite a bit is, one, read the whole work. Now, if you're reading somebody's work and you're having a tough time getting through it, that might be the best feedback they ever get, because a lot of things are going on mechanically. The story is scatterbrained. I mean, there's no continuity. There's no clear defined plot, or it's just hard to get through due to the diction, whatever have you. You have to ensure that criticism is there. And then don't just say, hey, come back when you learn how to write. It's, hey, these are the mechanical things you are missing. Let's talk about how your storycraft is working and what you're trying to get to. Okay? And that's some of the best feedback. If you're somebody who is impassioned or has a passionate drive to be a writer, you're going to take feedback from many, many different sources. But if someone's willing to sit with you and go through the mechanical work and go through the mechanics and go through everything that you're working through as a writer, making those breakthroughs is huge. I mean, for me, I don't know why this happens, but tense switching. Don't know why I do it. It just happens. I'll go from first person to third person, and it really upsets readers. So, for me, it was really a challenge of staying in that first person mode or staying in third person, or, if I'm writing a poem, not have it be too philosophical or existential, or maybe utilize more impactful words to get my point across instead of being vague, might have been the criticism I needed for that particular piece. Now, I know with my Tears poem alone, I've gone through probably 5 to 10 iterations of that. So writers rewrite. Good writers are always going to rewrite whatever they're doing. Even if you're an essayist, if you have a nice solid essay and you want it read on here, by all means submit it. I mean, make it entertaining, but if you got a nice solid read, then by all means let me know. Or if you're an oral storyteller and you happen to get a transcript of your storytelling, then that can be done on here too. Or if you want to record yourself, performing your poem, your story, or reading your fiction work or nonfiction, whatever have you, send it to me. Make sure that I get it so we can move forward and, go on into the beautiful world of getting your work out there. Okay. So one of the aspects of writing I have found is being a solid reader. if you're not a solid reader and you're trying to get into the world of writing, you're going to have to do your due diligence and catch back up. Because what's going to happen is you're going to fly, under the radar because you're not, I don't know if experienced enough is the word I want to use, but you're not intimately embracing the multiple ways of storytelling. And not everybody does, and not everybody embraces that. So, there is a book by Francine Prose, Reading Like a Writer, that I wholeheartedly recommend. That book is utilized in creative writing programs across the country, and for good reason. Because the book, helps with tense, it helps with different writing styles, it identifies different ways to go about exposition, ways to go about dialogue. It delves into the classics and newer fiction. So it's really one of those impactful books that I think is going to elevate the game of writing. Now, the 3 a.m. Epiphany is what I talked about last week, and that's an amazing book because it's listed slew of prompts, right? But you're going to want to have those more organic prompts. And here's what I mean by organic prompt. Something happens to you. You catch something on the news. You experience a tragedy or a heartbreak or something. Especially as poets, we are really good at wearing our emotions on our sleeve, especially when we're being romantic. We become wordsmiths at almost overnight when we have that budding romance that we're trying to put into feeling and word. So if you can take that creative energy and attack it, that's one of the best ways to do it, is do it organically. Or hey, if you're doing research if you're at school and you're doing research for an essay, whatever you stumble upon your research, maybe you can, as an aside, write a short story about whatever you find. Or if you happen to overhear a very goofy conversation with a couple, maybe start off your work with that. So organic ways to prompt yourself, right? Sometimes, freestyle or free writing is a great way to start, and a lot of my stories start off with at least a good 5 minutes of free writing. And then once I've got it in my head, the kind of direction I want to go with the story, I rework it. I go back into the mechanics and I really attack how I want to compose the story. So, it's just something to think about, something to move forward with and work on when you do get a chance. Today's Creatacast is, a lot about getting your work out there. If you're afraid to submit to a magazine, that's okay. I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to get rejection letters. But that's okay too. If those rejection letters offer feedback, accept it. Enjoy that feedback. That means somebody took the time out of their day to actually read your work, right? So embrace those moments. Embrace that feedback you get from those you may not even particularly like feedback from, which would be, getting those rejection letters, or, if you're getting a slew of rejection letters, go back to the drawing board with that story. Figure out what it is that might be sabotaging your creative work. Okay? Now, I'm not saying you have to alter it. You don't have to. If you think you did a really good job on your story and it's, already been through several edits of your own, and, you workshopped it, in class, or you workshopped it with a group of people, then, run with it, stick with it, because you never know. That story might mean something to somebody somewhere, and it'll get out there. But there are a slew of digital magazines you got to reach out for. Digital magazines are kind of the rage right now. They have a giant following and readership. People who have, like, of course, the print magazines, of course, are what, kind of like the I made it kind of moment for poets and fiction writers. But, shoot for the big leagues too. You don't have to deny yourself and stick in the small leagues. Go for the big leagues too. Go for a major publication. A major publication would be, the New York Times, or not the New York Times. What's that magazine? Or the National Enquirer? Not National Enquirer. It's some sort of big, or the Gazette. Some sort of bigger publication, right? So, go for the big ones. Shoot big. You don't have to stay in small potatoes. That's okay too. Don't underestimate your writing. Don't think it's, nobody will think it's no good. Nobody will know if you don't ever share. We ultimately write to share. If you believe you've written all these great stories to never share, you're denying yourself and you're lying to yourself is what's going on. So just be conscious of that magic you bring, okay? And I want to recognize that. I want to recognize that in all of my fellow creatives. Okay, so, if you're out there in the ether web right now and you're listening and you want to get your work submitted, send it to dwelch9627@gmail.com. So, I'll say it phonetically. Delta, Whiskey, Echo, Lima, Charlie, Hotel, 9627@gmail.com. Or Creatacast2018@gmail.com. So that's C as in Charlie, Romeo, Echo, Alpha, Tango, Alpha, Charlie, Alpha, Sierra, Tango. Let's see. Yeah, Creatacast 2018-2018@gmail.com. So Creatacast. So make sure you get your work in. That way we can take a stab at it and I get it read on here. Now, back to the books that are very highly impactful. On writing. If you're in the business of writing, or if you're a journalism major, or you want to just get better at the mechanics of writing, or just want to make yourself, a sharp writer, On Writing is probably one of the best books you should get. Or it's On Writing Well is the book. It's by William Zinsser. And it's called On Writing Well. This book is available in multiple editions, and it's freaking amazing. So it'll give you a really good look into making sure your writing's clear. It will help you with clarity, especially if you're writing nonfiction. If you're writing nonfiction, you're going to want to have this book on your shelf and reference it quite often, okay? So, On Writing Well. Now, I have been asked by some of my listeners already, what about mystery? What about sci-fi? What do you recommend for that? Now, when it comes to science fiction, Lucy Hawking's books are amazing if you're looking to, kind of delve into, that young adult literature sci-fi, or you could even go as far as reading Ender's Game with Orson Scott Card. If you want a very in-depth look into, creatures and chaos and, cyber weapons, of course, Terminator, Predator, and then there are subgenres like cyberpunk, steampunk. John Shirley, if you've not heard of John Shirley, that guy's a phenomenal cyberpunk writer. Okay, look him up. His books are extremely well reviewed. I think he did the movie version or the novelization of the film Constantine, and he's a fantastic writer. Historical fiction. If you write historical fiction, get those in too. I really want those pieces that really knock us out of the water, okay? And for you poets, we have gotten, what we've gone away from as poetry writers is the long poetry of the 1800s. I was listening to Alfred Noyes' The Highwayman the other day, and it's just a wonderful piece. And poets today aren't really putting in that kind of work to have that kind of length to their poem, and not many. I wouldn't say zero. There are quite a few that have very well composed longer pieces. But, kind of challenge yourself. See if you can do a longer poem. Okay? And a lot of things that we've strayed away from as far as poetry is very mechanical or working within our own constraints, right? I'm talking sestinas, sonnets, haikus. If you're not a very formal poet, get into it. Check it out. See what's holding you back from really embracing those mechanics and really embracing the stringent constriction of those mechanics and those rules based on, your writing, and see how creative you can be. Okay? So, and that's, one of the things that I really valued being a creative writing student, especially at Arizona State, where a lot of the writers, man, I'm talking some of the guys I was in school with were just phenomenal writers. Adam Gurley, Leah White, phenomenal. Elise, just so many. I can't even, think of everybody. Just look into your craft. If you're a writer, get into the nitty gritty. And I was going to talk about this last time that I really didn't get into, but I want to talk about, instead of free writing, a lot of people will just open up a Word document and free write their story, but we've lost, I think, the ability to really outline our stories. And I think a great outline tool, something that I especially use to kind of storyboard my books and my stories and my longer pieces, especially my plays, PowerPoint. You can literally PowerPoint every chapter. You can, really understand where you want your story to go. And you can add visuals to make it make sense to you. That way you can, move forward with your story. If you're writing science, science fiction especially, or creative nonfiction with science components, do the research. Look into biology. Look into, it's great to have these stories where, you have these hybrid humans or alien species and, everything like that. But if you don't get into some of the scientific aspects of why something is so, or, you don't talk about, amino acids, you don't get into, the kind of the actual science behind something, it becomes more of a fantasy fiction. Now, writing fantasy is perfectly okay. I love fantasy just like the next person. Huge R.A. Salvatore fan. I grew up reading Dragonlance, so it's one of those things. I love the Middle Earth that was created with Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. I really love the mythos of both of their worlds, and we have a little elements of that, but we also need elements of kind of that very simpler, more rugged fiction by Gary Paulson. When I read Hatchet as a kid, it was a wonderful story, and it was grounded in something that, hey, I was a young man, maybe it could happen to me. And young men really need that these days. They need to be intellectually stimulated by the chance of challenge. One of my favorite books, especially is something that helped me get through a really tough time in my life, was Bridge to Terabithia by Catherine Peterson. And it's one of my favorite novels for a number of reasons. Not only is it a Newbery Medal recipient, it's a wonderful testament to simple craft and very good storytelling. And it doesn't have the ending you half expect it to have once you first get into it, because at first you're reading Bridge to Terabithia not knowing anything about it. You're like, man, they're having this wonderful blossoming relationship, and then, I'm not going to spoil for anybody if you haven't read it, but the ending really hits you in the feels. And there are movies that do that too. Now, I'm not going to discount you script writers out there. It hits you in the feels. You want those feelings challenged, because if you go through life and you've never had heartbreak and heartache, like the loss of someone, or if you've never had a breakup, or you've never had death in the family, experiencing it through fiction and literature first might actually help prepare you psychologically for the inevitability of someone passing away in your family, immediate family, and so on. Okay, and there's a lot of work to be said and done about macabre type writing or noir, and those type of writings are highly encouraged. I enjoy those pieces. I also like, very good storytelling that gets the heart racing, 300 style or Sin City style. I mean, I've seen writers come out of the woodwork since those films have been produced, and the way they storytell is hearkening back to the golden age of detective storytelling, and the fact that you get a narrator that has a particular gravelly voice. Even if you've never heard their voice, you have it imprinted on your head that they have a certain way of cadence and certain way of speaking. And that's one thing I want to expound upon too, is cadence. Cadence as a writer is very important. There are certain writers that I really love their cadence and the way that they write. Alexander Kent is one of them. Extremely excellent series. It's about naval historical fiction, British naval historical fiction, and it's, I think, 30 books or 30 plus books, and it's just such a wonderful read. And you consume them so fast because they're written with a particular cadence. They're written with a particular style that's just very rewarding to read. Okay? Now, I have been reading science fiction where it friggin' stumps me what the hell they're getting at in the exposition. It really does. Maybe it was beyond me. Maybe it was beyond my understanding. But, nowadays, especially with the British writers, are so good at this that they're able to convey complex things in very layman type terms. And if you can't do that, and you can't, embrace people's imagination a little bit, you don't have to be Charles Dickens and go into every detail about what you're talking about. But the details do matter. And the details, especially if you're reading, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if you're reading, or the other one, Douglas Adams wrote, the Holistic, I can't remember what the hell the name of that one is, but it was a good, good storytelling novel, right? And he just has a particular cadence that you enjoy. There are some short writers and poets that have a particular cadence, like, Yusuf Komunyakaa. If you've ever read any of his poetry, or if you've ever heard his poetry, it has a particular cadence, has a particular style, it is said. It's very calming, very abrupt in some parts, and very and his word choice is next level phenomenal. It's almost melodic when you hear him say it. In fact, I've often listened to recordings of his poetry with music accompanied, so that's something you can try as well if you're not the biggest poetry reader. But challenge yourself to get into realms you may not have ever thought of. Flip normal conventions on their side. Sometimes it's okay to play the devil's advocate. Sometimes it's okay to be the villain. You don't always have to have a hero story. Sometimes the hero is the villain. We've seen that with numerous villains. I mean, we've seen that in the MCU with Killmonger, Thanos, Deadpool is an anti-hero. I love anti-heroes. If you have a very good anti-hero story, please get them to me. That way we can make this show just fly, okay? I'm going to check Creatacast right now, see if there has been a publication or an email sent over there. Yeah, I'm working on that right now. But yeah, I'm open to calls too. If you want to call in, please utilize the mechanism of the app, or even send me an email. That way I can address your question, much less take on a submission. But that's one of the things that I really want to go in the direction of the show is submissions. That's where I want the meats and potatoes of my show to go. So for those who are on my, follow me on Twitter, you follow me on social media, or you've had a chance to read my book or my poetry, please, get this to your creative friends, and I take submissions on a weekly basis. Okay. There's going to be a 45-minute show every Friday until we get our show bigger, of course. So, right now, I don't have anyone in the chat, it looks like. I don't have, a lot going on in Twitterverse. Now, I do know some people are tuning in from Twitter, and thank you for that. But I want to look at a little of the mechanics of some of the writing that I'm working on. I do have my book. I have decided to move my streaming life from December publication to January. Quite frankly, because I just have not had the time to complete and edit it the way I want to. But that's okay. Sometimes we don't meet our deadlines, but we sure as shit better make an effort to get there. Okay? So let's see. What can we go ahead and read and get into? Now this is actually in my book, Rockin' Hard Times. This is a poem called Between Sleep and Awake. It's something that I've workshopped on a number of times. I've really gotten into the nitty-gritty on this poem, but I think I wrote it during Dr. Bavona's class when I was at Arizona State. Sorry, Dr. Bavona, if you ever tune into this. I did write this poem in your class, but it was actually kind of kicked off, and I got the genesis of this poem by Dr. Larry Ellis. So once he hears it, he might understand exactly what I'm getting at. But yeah, both of those professors at Arizona State, awesome. Now, I think it's the word hypnagogic that really set this this poem in motion. I know Dr. Bavona utilized it a ton, but I also heard it echoed by Dr. Ellis in English 200 when I took it with him. So I'm going to get into it. It's called Between Sleep and Awake. And I wrote it probably, I think 2010 is when I wrote this. The hazy morning dew of spring glitters as a shepherd's sun envelops a gentle fawn on equally wobbly knees. Clear blue summer afternoons shine as a man wrestles the mighty lion on legs of iron. Foggy, chill winter nights freeze as a gray-haired man nods to an inky crow on sticks of wood. Between hypnagogic trances and vivid hallucinations, the flats, sharps, and rests of tones reflect off of Queen Alexandria's wings as the monarch soars by at 17 miles per hour. Taking place in dreams and time, insomnia begins to blend real and fantasy, today and tomorrow, then and now, who and how. Misty harbors of psyche attain carnal knowledge on the grassy knoll of psilocybin, exploding inside a weary head with a finger paints on a black canvas. Fickle now the transcendence of the color spectrum as it aligns to those who die and are dying. Now, looking at the poem, you're like, what the hell is that about? And I can totally understand people's take on that. But what it means to me, and hopefully it means something different to everyone else, because that would be wonderful if it had a different meaning for everybody. But I really try and encapsulate the full circle of life and the importance of observation, the importance of expanding the mind and refreshing those synapses as we sleep, as we go into those really dreamy states that we wake up in or fall asleep in, and enjoy those dreams. Carl Jung was really one of the inspirations for me to keep a dream journal. And a dream journal is something I did during my undergrad, and I really should pick it back up again. But a dream journal, essentially, if you get an idea in the middle of the night and you have a very vivid dream, well, write it down. Maybe that could be the genesis of a story you never even dreamed of writing or telling. Okay? And a lot of us forget. A lot of us, if we're up for longer than 2 minutes without getting back into the dream, sometimes we have dreams where we want to get back in them so bad, we go back to sleep or try to get in that mode or sleep in that position again or whatever it is to get us back in that dream state and to have those dreams we did. For those who are the dream writers out there, and you know who you are, keep your dream journal by your bed and jot down in the middle of the night what you have. The 3 a.m. epiphany. That's probably around the time you're going to wake up and jot it down. Or unless you're me and you have to frequently get up in the middle of the night, then write down what's in there. Sometimes there's nothing. But sometimes there's a wonderful world waiting to be unleashed. Okay? And sometimes, I don't know why this is, but sometimes we have recurring dreams. If it's something in our life that's constantly coming back to us, get back in there. Let's really, get back into that mode. Or if you have that dream again, ask yourself why you're having those dreams and why you're really having that show up in your life. Okay? So let's go ahead and get into another poem. And I think I want to do... Which one do I want to do? Well, let's see if I can get into our streaming life. I think I read the new season. Television poetry, Walter White's Elegy. Orange is the New Black. I don't think I have this one finished yet. Well, maybe I do. Alright. Okay. So this is kind of a homage to Orange is the New Black. Love that show. I really do. If you have not seen that show on Netflix, it's really binge-worthy. And we're gonna talk about the importance of Netflix and Hulu and its role in my next book coming up here in a minute. But I'm gonna go ahead and read this. It's gonna be in the new book, My Streaming Life, or Our Streaming Life. So I really haven't shifted that idea out of the way yet, but we're getting into it. So, orange is the new black. Peaches, some ripen, some ripped to shreds, 2 pieces, 2 bits. Women are brutal, loving, spiteful, caring, lustful, nurturing, deceitful, kind, hateful, empathetic, terrifying, powerful, straight, lesbian, bi, trans, and leaders. There are over 1 million incarcerated women in the United States. Mothers, daughters, sisters, murderers, rapists, substance abusers, con artists, drug traffickers, sex workers, gangsters, and thieves. We also know the system is fair, or it is fair, that keeps the engine, the maw of the prison industrial complex, to grind my human flesh into its never-ending cycle of destruction. The uterus isn't even off limits to the law. Human watches human in a state of wicked decay, though the correctional officers are criminals of a protected sort. The thin blue line extends to the keepers of the cages, the wardens of the souls, the boogeyman of nightmares. A justice system is a just us system, with money exchanging hands over bodies, lives, and freedom. Okay? And that is the end of the Orange is the New Black. I imagine that this might be a little bit longer when the publication comes out, but this is what I have so far. If you want to give me some feedback on this, by all means, let me know. I'll be happy to send you a copy. That way you can take a look at the mechanics of how I've worked this poem, and, we'll go from there. Sound good? Sound good. Constructive feedback is a must. But let's talk about some fiction. Get into the fiction. Alright, what story do I want to tell? That's the question. Got so many to choose from. My goodness. I've read quite a bit from my book, and I'm going to read from my book again. I'm just having a minute of choosing which poem might be best read. I think I'm gonna, and this is a little bit longer story. It's called The Animals Know. Let's see how many pages we got working here. If it's too many pages, I'm going to have to choose something else. Okay. It's about right. Alright, so this is The Animals Know, and this is in my book that I have out there, Hell's Waiting Room and Other Stories. It is available on Amazon. And I will go ahead and shamelessly plug in your book if you do have a book coming out. And if you want your poetry out there, I can also talk about different services that you can get published through. Now, again, Hell's Waiting Room and Other Stories is available on Amazon.com. So this is the story, The Animals Know. I sniffed the air, Tommy Hilfiger, vanilla perfume. She doesn't know, but I know. The animals know too. Like when danger is approaching or when it is their time. Dogs, like most animals, run off to die somewhere quiet, comfortable, and alone. Sometimes they wait for their kids to go to school, like grandparents wait after Christmas. I am an animal. Stalking the halls of my kennel-like prison, school they call it, I notice things. There is the smell of adolescence, pungent stuff, like the wrestling mats downstairs, near the school's aged twin boilers, where decades of blood, sweat hide away like silent reapers. Every day I drag my corpse from their grass to my shanty house, where Dad beats me at night for tomorrow's transgressions. In a growling snarl he wails, "Get your ass over here." I run backwards into my animal mind, waiting for the quiet after the storm of blows. Sometimes I just lie there in the blood, piss, and beer until he orders me to clean up. During that time, I think about a book. One book in particular about a man rising up against those who beat him, Spartacus. I envision thrusting a sword right through my father's breast, or beheading him with a quick swipe of the blade. She is squeaky clean. I smell like dirty laundry. How can she sit there in front of me in class is amazing. My twin black eyes keep Miss Powers from calling on me entirely. So I am free to look about the room uninhibited by questions. But all I can focus on is the girl in front of me. Her whiter-than-white smile, whiter-than-white shoes, and her whiter-than-white sweater contrast her pixie raven cut. A test is being passed around the room. As she turns in her seat to give me the sheet of rectangular cut paper, she gasps, "Is my appearance that horrible?" I feel like a lion at the zoo as everyone turns my direction to gaze and gasps in unison. I freak out and make a beeline straight for the door. "Mister," is all I hear from Miss Powers before the door silences the rest. The door opens behind me, but I run faster. All I can think to do is run to the only place I feel normal, the wrestling room. The familiar smells of people working out hits me as I race down the stairs and run into the clang and bang of re-racked weights. The class that is lifting weights doesn't even see me, thank God. I run into the boiler room where Coach keeps one spinner bike for those who need to cut a few pounds before weigh-ins. I strip down to my spandex underwear and hop on. I start pedaling, but there is no resistance, so I adjust it to where it's just painful enough to burn as I make a full rotation. I don't know how long I was there or riding, but I wake up on the ground. My eyes are covered in either tears or sweat. I don't know. There is a term some of the funnier wrestlers use when they are sore. My everything hurts. However, in this case, my whole body is really in pain. Mostly my legs and abs dominate my sense of anguish. There's a slight, very slight breeze moving from my left shoulder to my right one. The fan. It is on, but I don't remember turning it on. Is he awake? Shit, someone is in here. And I'm pretty naked. And I'm nearly naked. They definitely see why I always wear long sleeve shirts and jeans, even in summer. Bruises and cuts riddle my body from the beatings my father gives me. Oh my God, Jen, look at him. Great, now I'm a sideshow. Clear the way, girls. That's Coach for sure. I don't recognize his baritone cadence. I can recognize his baritone cadence anywhere. A cold cloth. Good, something to cover my face from those looking at me. I feigned the passed out look. Look at his bruises. Ew, my God. I want to rage at her to get her out of the room, but I didn't have to. Get out of here and fetch the nurse.